Hello, and welcome to Doctor Who 50 years ago, the show that looks back to the episode that aired in 1967 and looks at the differences between then and now. This week, episode 4 of the Faceless ones, featuring a space flight more successful than the Soviets, which is kind of awkward given the news. I am Ben.
I am Luke.
And I'm Nick.
Here we are, and here we go into the news from 1967. On Sunday, the 23rd of April, the Soviet Union launched Soyuz No. 1 up with one of their top Air Force colonels for a 72-hour mission. On Monday, the 24th of April, said Soviet cosmonaut died, the first to die during a spaceflight when the parachute failed on re-entry and he crashed, becoming a blackened lump. Very nasty. Given the spaceflight in this episode, here is a darker tale about travelling to the stars. Yeah, we've heard so much about the American space race. Here's the Soviets.
Yeah, and it's not going all to plan. There's this sort of, what I said last week, where the Soviets are starting to fall by the wayside at this point, after having dominated.
For the first half, yes.
When was the first launch into space?
Yuri Gagarin in 1961.
Right, so it is quite good that
Oh, yeah.
it's only 6 years until we get a death.
No. He was not. This is not the first person to die.
The first person to die during space flight.
Yeah.
Space flight, yeah, but you remember Apollo 1, where they didn't even get off the ground.
Oh, right.
That blew up with 3 of them in it.
Right, okay.
No, but yeah, people have died in space before now.
Yeah, but what this basically shows is the technological challenges and the human cost of getting into space and winning the space race.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, on to slightly less nasty things. On Tuesday the 25th of April, Colorado got the US's most liberal abortion law yet, allowing termination of pregnancy under 4 conditions. North Carolina and California would make similar changes to their laws later in the year. This is progress leading towards 1972 or 1973's federal legislation.
Yeah, this is just a general sign of the West, sort of like the United States, Western Europe, beginning to become more socially liberal. I believe, did we abolished, we legalized abortion in 1967, didn't we?
1968, I think.
Yeah, as part of, so Europe being slightly ahead on social matters compared to the US, pretty much.
But the trend is progressing towards
Yes, towards more, I mean, nowadays it would be absurd to not be able to have legalized abortion in most of the world. Well, most of the Western world, I should say.
So is Colorado today a very liberal?
Yes, it's one that it's one of the states that's legalized marijuana.
So, predicting this, what can we see for the future, taking Colorado as a template?
What you mean? So about drug laws?
I suppose so. If that's what Colorado
Yeah, well, pretty much. There will come a time when marijuana, weed, whatever you want to call it, will be legal throughout the entire West. Yeah, our generation is the most liberal towards drugs since pre-World War One, I think.
And finally, back to Russia on Saturday the 29th of April. Izvestia became the first daily newspaper in the Soviet Union to publish a comic strip, Ivanich, with an engineer using heavy-handed humour to point up shortcomings in Soviet services. This is surprisingly liberal for a state-controlled press in the world's biggest communist well, no, not world's biggest, because China, but yeah, the communist state. I just found it surprisingly odd.
That's interesting.
Especially under Brezhnev's control.
Yeah, I guess it was very gentle.
They couldn't have been subversive.
Yeah, very gentle, the same way that people complain about how trains run here. That's a very easy target, and it's not really critical of the state.
Okay, yeah, well, jokes were allowed in Soviet Russia.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is that they're allowing that in the sense that they're not trying to squash any resistance. If you have that little bit of recognition to your flaws, people will generally warm to you a bit more.
You could counter-argue that by allowing this tiny, let's say, crack in the authoritarian regime, it ends up that eventually entire Soviet premiers' reign are just a joke. I'm thinking of Andropov in the late 80s, to the point where he's now eulogized in a meme, becomes leader of the Soviet Union, dies. The Soviet Union's authority, in the people's sense, is weakened, and it leads towards the revolutions of the 80s. All from this, just all stemming from this comic strip. So yeah, this one joke started the collapse of the Soviet Union. No, it didn't. The Soviet Union instigated the collapse of the Soviet Union. But enough about the Soviet Union. Let's get on to the Faceless Ones. That was the news. And the Faceless Ones, episode 4. Some more tonal whiplash, because we decided to become a Bond epic, but in essence this episode is the end of Act 2, as I said last week, in that it shows the brilliant thing of, oh look, an alien spaceship, how are they going to get out of that?
What seems interesting is that the first 2 episodes were very sci-fi heavy. These 2 episodes are very Bond/Avengers spy mode. It'll be interesting to see, as you said, this is the end of Act 2, if the last 2 episodes have their own genre flavour, or which mode they choose as a result of this.
Not wanting to go into spoilers, I think they kick back to sci-fi. Although they might actually include crime and drama. It could be a blend, I can't remember.
Well, that would be very interesting.
But ultimately, it's a good episode. It sets stuff up. It leads to a climax.
But what I found most interesting is that whereas last episode you had sci-fi at the beginning and end, and then the rest in the middle was just crime, here we have constant reminders of the sci-fi throughout. It keeps popping up in what is generally sort of very standard fare for 60s television. And I like that it's being able to blend the sci-fi a lot more this time. It feels a lot more natural.
Yes. It's also managing to deal with these themes whilst continuing against the Doctor's anti-authoritarian message, running around the commandant with him not knowing what's going on.
Yeah, very much this episode is a continuation of what we've seen so far, and I think the cliffhanger definitely suggests we're now moving into a new phase, so as you say, the end of Act 2.
Yeah, it gets a bit difficult in part 4 of a 6-parter.
Yeah.
Hence those ideas of this is the end of Act 2 of
yeah,
play.
I mean, yeah, this feels very much like a continuation of part 3, really.
So this episode is a continuation, so it's only fair that we continue to analyse it. The passengers on the Chameleon Tours flight have disappeared. Spencer, Jamie and Samantha clash, but the young ones are immobilised, like the Doctor. Spencer then decides to become a Bond villain and points a laser death ray, which slowly walks towards his not truly immobilised captives, long enough for them to work out a solution to their problem, Samantha's mirror, which bounces the laser back and allows them to escape. Talk about tonal whiplash, like I just said, it's gone from being a crime drama to an over-the-top Bond epic.
Last week we had 2 cliffhangers, whereas this week it starts with what feels like the general cliffhanger, and it doesn't feel like a beginning. I always think about the Pyramids of Mars episode 2, where the Doctor gets immediately trapped in the lodestone. That feels like the point of the cliffhanger. Here we have a similar thing. I wonder if it was due to time.
Yeah, basically they've set up what seems to be an alternative cliffhanger, or you could argue that it's peril to keep the audience invested from the end of one cliffhanger straight into the next one. It's instigating action, you could argue.
That's very interesting, because at this point in a 4-parter, this is when the action starts to slow down. So the fact that they're starting this with something that propels the action for what would be traditionally the filler episode, I suppose that is a good point.
And it contrasts nicely with the sort of no action other cliffhanger that we had, which was Crosland on the airplane. that there is no action there.
Yeah,
at all.
that's the mystery cliffhanger.
The mystery cliffhanger. So it's to sort of keep you engaged in and make sure that you're not too bored. I feel this is more for the kids, whilst the mystery cliffhanger is more for the adults.
Ooh, he's playing to both audiences. That's a good thing for Malcolm Holt to do. Blade delivers Crossland to their base, in inverted commas, for their director to have a copy of. Nurse Pinto, meanwhile, continues her chameleon conversion processes in the first aid post of Gatwick Airport, before the revitalised Doctor and Jamie come in to try and ruin everything for her, whilst Spencer tries for the 4th time to kill the Doctor. It sets up the main point of the episode where the Doctor tries to learn more about what chameleon tours are doing in the first aid post of Gatwick Airport. We've had their hangar, we've had the kiosk. This is another area of the airport which is shown to be not safe. Ooh.
Yeah, this is very much in the vein of Power of the Daleks, where the stakes are increasing, and the Doctor is figuring out the mystery piece by piece. He's getting closer and closer to the heart of the conspiracy.
The chameleons' tours convert more people. Yeah.
I wish we had some more footage of this bit, because this seems like a very visual bit. It's a shame that in the 2 episodes we don't have any proper shots of the chameleons themselves.
Yes, it's a bit of a shame, really. I wonder why. Maybe because what they'll eventually be shown to be as actual faceless ones was deemed too horrifying, too graphic. Jamie rejoins Samantha at the kiosk hunting for Spencer, whilst the Doctor, the Commandant and his lovely secretary discover the disappearance of Crossland. They discover also that no planes arrive at the destinations chameleon tours apparently serve. They go somewhere else. This base, of course. So the Commandant decides to follow the next plane to see where it goes. Samantha's decided to go on that next flight, but Jamie steals her ticket romantically.
This must be significant. A kiss on Doctor Who?
Yes.
This surely didn't happen before then. This surely must be the first time 2 characters have properly kissed on Doctor Who.
Well, it's longer than the 2-3 seconds of kissing there are in the Dalek invasion of Earth.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's mouths and everything, but the first Doctor comes in and disrupts it like everything, and that's partly due to Terry Nation's writing, I think. Whereas in here, what is used is Jamie becomes the Doctor. Or rather, he's seen the Doctor enough times that his manipulation rubs off on him, and he uses his wily charms, which is very intelligent for him, to steal Samantha's ticket and do what he thinks is the right thing and puts himself in danger rather than Samantha, which is extremely clever.
This is the episode I would say marks it down as where Jamie stops being Jamie and becomes Fraser Hines, pretty much.
Okay, sure.
No, you know what I mean? Yeah, as Jamie goes on, he's always Jamie, but he becomes basically Fraser Hines.
Yes.
Which is not a bad thing. I love Fraser Hines,
No,
this is a great thing. I'm saying this is a good thing, but him being from 18th century Scotland stops weighing down on him so much. He's become so savvy of being with the Doctor. He's being set up here as the full-time companion with...
And the perfect audience identification figure, yeah.
Yeah.
Because...
Also, even more than that, he's more like... He's definitely there for the girls, as it were. A good example I'd use is my mum, who used to watch this back in the day, in the 60s. She fancied Jamie a bit.
Okay.
So,
yeah, sure. This is
there for the girls.
This is going to continue, at the very least, to Evil of the Daleks Episode 1, which has another excellent scene with Jamie in it.
I like this bit because what it is, everyone's thinking as though it's a crime drama. However, throughout this episode, the Doctor is giving that sci-fi presence that he didn't have last time. He's thinking that these things, well, are they really going to a private airfield? And I like that. I like that he's becoming more... It's not just he's an anti-authoritarian presence. It's that He is a presence completely separate from the bureaucracy, which, at least from the audience's perspective, is incredibly small-minded.
Yes.
And I think that demonstrates the Doctor's character a lot stronger than having him say things. I mean, obviously, you can have him say things really well, but this is one of those moments that you really get it as the audience.
Absolutely. He's demonstrating that reality is science fiction. And no matter how many times the bureaucracy blunders about and denies it otherwise, he eventually wins them over. As we will see. Go the Doctor and Jamie! Woohoo!
Yeah!
Better. Speaking of the Doctor, the lovely secretary feigns illness and forces Nurse Pinto to abandon the first aid post, allowing the Doctor to sneak in and discover the chameleon conversion process. Or rather, the audience does. Spencer's next lackey, a converted Jenkins, tries to kill the Doctor and fails as a passenger intervenes, allowing the Doctor to escape with vital armbands and the information he needs.
It's a nice touch here that the next victim, as it were, of the conversion process is Jenkins, who we saw in episode 1. So it's increasing the stakes, not only now is it people we hadn't seen before, the air traffic control radio guy, it's now someone that we have seen and recognised before. So it really is quite creepy. It's people that you know are having their faces stolen pretty much.
It's personable characters, however minor, you've actually grown to know.
Yeah. So it is ramping up that threat.
And it does go to the next stage in the next 2 episodes. I can confirm that, and I won't go any further because spoilers. So again, this episode is a continuation, and it is at that end of Act 2 stage. I cannot stress it any further, partly because I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel right now.
What I will say, historically, I think it's good for the serial format that they're using that person from episode 1. Episode 1 would generally get the highest ratings because midway through a story, you couldn't tune back in because you'd be incredibly lost.
Yes.
So if you're going to use someone from a while ago, do it from the one that everyone definitely saw. And I think that's a smart decision, even if it wasn't intentional.
Indeed, they've been doing it with references to the now definitely not here anymore Ben and Polly in every episode. And this happens once more in this episode. And suddenly we've got to the end of the episode. Samantha discovers Jamie's stolen her ticket, but the cocky chameleon tours allow her on the flight anyway, as Spencer recaptures her. And so the plane with the captured Samantha and an ill Jamie takes off, with the RAF on its tail. Blade shoots the RAF plane down before making his plane become a rocket, making the passengers disappear, or rather become seemingly smaller, and ascends to a base in orbit. And this is the Act 2 cliffhanger. We've stolen all the companions, we split the Doctor up, all he's got is the Commandant and his lovely secretary, and he's still got to deal with Nurse Pinto, and the aliens have pretty much kidnapped everybody to their base in space.
I really, really like this cliffhanger.
It builds up really nicely.
Yeah. And I always think of You Only Live Twice, the Bond film. It begins with this awesome opening sequence where these people in space, a rocket in space gets eaten by this bigger rocket. And I think that at the time, that must have played some very genuine fears. I get a similar feeling here because the boundaries between regular flight and space flight, they're both very futuristic, which Jamie talks about at the beginning, where he says that a ray gun is just as insane to him as all of these flying metal machines. I do like that it's so insane that they're able to use it that way. There's a genuine fear of space flight.
Yes, because it's still connecting up with the spy ideas, because this could still be a space base for spies. And especially when you compare the space race to the Cold War and all that, it's still ideas that are prevalent in the audience's mind, despite the inclusion of aliens.
This is very much crossing back right into the 60s sci-fi. This is very 60s sci-fi. You wouldn't see this in modern day science fiction. So if I saw this happening now, I'd be kind of disappointed by it. But in a 60s context, this is fine to me. It's quite a cool kind of. It's very much a sudden left turn. I didn't expect this to happen.
Yes, it's the kind of sudden left turn you would see in the end of a first-parter of a two-parter in Modern Who.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Under the Lake, where the Doctor seemingly is killed, and that becomes the premise for the whole of Before the Flood.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting the way you say that. Sci-fi in the 60s was more focused on moments and coolness and escapism, and we've lost that a bit. Whilst we can still get into that sort of thing, the public on the whole has become more focused on realism, and everything has to be a lot more relatable and a lot of the time simplified. And I think it is a shame that we can't. Well, it's not that we can't. We don't have moments like this.
I think that might be appeals to the lowest common denominator, which is a sort of standard trend that media has gone into as we've entered the 21st century.
I wouldn't even say that. It's that we expect a lot more knowledge and realism out of people because we've sort of become more educated. We expect a greater attention to detail of the realistic aspects.
Okay.
If you look at Kill the Moon, the moon somehow gained all of those spider germs, which are all one cell. No one can watch that nowadays because we know too much. Whereas back in the 60s, you were sort of able to let that fly a bit more. There's a sense of innocence which has been lost. In the 60s, you could be a bit innocent to the sci-fi, and there's that they didn't really know better. Whereas nowadays, we feel we should know better. And sometimes it's a hindrance.
Okay, that's interesting. So, for New Who, it's become too real, and what we might need, is a harken back to the days of fantasy, and dare I say it, space bugs like the Web Planet.
If we look at the Ice Warriors, where the long speech about global warming is got completely wrong, nowadays it has a certain charm to it. You did that nowadays, you would be shouted at, and rightly, you should know better. Back in the day, it was more fantastical escapism. We don't expect the same nonsense. We expect our writers to be a lot more clued up.
Right, so we've outgrown escapism.
In sci-fi, I think if you're going to have escapism in sci-fi, you have to make it very aware from the beginning that you're not trying to be realistic at all. So, say something like Star Wars or Guardians of the Galaxy, where there is no attempt made to be realistic. If you're in Doctor Who, though, I feel like Doctor Who's always straddled that line between fantasy and real life.
Yeah.
And so nowadays it does tend to tip more into real life. I expect Doctor Who writers to be more clued up now than in the 60s.
It's interesting that you bring up Guardians of the Galaxy because that plays so much on nostalgia. And in a sense, I think it's brilliant that we had that era of escapism because now whenever we harken back to it, we get that warm, fuzzy feeling. So long as there's that little wink at the camera that we know what we're doing.
That's the entire premise of Big Finish audios, right?
Well, a lot of them. Yeah. The fact that we had that means that we get this little gooey feeling when it's playing to that. And I think it's brilliant that we had that in the past. And it also means that in the modern day, we're able to have that realism as well, but also have that cheesiness that is self-aware enough to play it up and be funny and sort of good at it.
So there we are. We seem to have discovered a interesting crossing over point between Doctor Who 50 years ago and now. Optimism and sort of slightly campy cheesiness of the 60s versus the sort of hardened, tempered realism of now. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay,
My
then.
dissertation documentary is on this, so yeah.
Oh, excellent!
Yes.
Fantastic. I need to look at
It's
that.
called 2017, 50 years ago.
Is it
And
really?
Yeah, it's based on this podcast, baby.
Holy hell! Whoops, I'm terribly sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Thank you very much for watching. You can find us on Blogspot, which redirects to iTunes. Leave positive comments there, it helps. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube, where you can like, comment and subscribe, and Google Plus if you dare. We shall be back next week to flimsily focus on episode 5 of The Faceless Ones. Until then, I've been Ben.
4 has been Luke.
4 has been Nick.
This is a terrible joke. Why have you done it again? Thank you, and goodbye.